3 coverage categories, clear triggers, and most solo coaches will skip at least 2 of them. The job in this video is not to talk you into buying all 3. It is to walk the trigger conditions so the skip is a deliberate decision rather than a default one. Workers' compensation, business auto, and umbrella each have a yes or no answer for whether they apply to your current situation. Each yes routes to a coverage conversation, and all 3 no means you have made an intentional choice, with the triggers documented for later review when something in the practice changes. Each category has a single trigger that determines whether the coverage is mandatory, recommended, or skippable. Workers' comp triggers on employees. Business auto triggers on regular business use of a personal vehicle. Umbrella triggers on assets, public profile, or client liability exposure climbing past what underlying policies cover. The trigger question is binary in each case. Yes, you have employees, or no, you do not. Yes, you drive regularly for business, or no, you do not. Yes, your exposure has climbed, or no, it has not. The point is to make each decision once with the trigger named, then run the same check annually as part of the renewal calendar from Unit 14.8. Workers' compensation is mandatory the moment you have employees, and the qualifier is employees specifically, not contractors. State thresholds vary on when the requirement kicks in. Some states trigger workers' comp at 1 employee, some at 3, some at 5. The variation is jurisdiction specific, and the answer for your state is 1 quick search or 1 CPA question away. Mandatory means mandatory. Workers' comp is a legal requirement when triggered, not an optional protective layer you weigh against premium cost. If you hire an employee at any point in the practice, the workers' comp question becomes a do-it-now item, not a price-it-when-convenient one. Contractors are not employees, and the distinction is what most coaches rely on to skip workers' comp during the founding years. Admin help on a 1099, web development on a contract basis, sub-coaching arrangements with other independent coaches. None of those relationships automatically trigger workers' comp. The retroactive risk is what makes the classification matter beyond the current decision. If a misclassification challenge succeeds later, the contractor was actually functioning as an employee under the IRS or state criteria. The retroactive exposure can include back workers' comp premiums, penalties, and unpaid back taxes. Module 18 covers the classification criteria in detail. Correct classification up front is the risk mitigation. Business auto triggers when your personal vehicle is used regularly for business purposes beyond commuting. Personal auto policies typically exclude commercial use accidents, meaning if you have an accident while driving to a client's site, a speaking engagement, or a workshop you are running, the personal policy may deny the claim entirely. The denial is contractual, not negotiable. The exclusion is in the policy language and the carrier enforces it. The risk is not the cost of the accident itself, which your personal policy would have covered for a non-business drive. The risk is the gap between assumed coverage and actual coverage when the accident happens during business use. 2 paths depending on how often you actually drive for business. Occasional business miles route to a business use endorsement on your existing personal auto policy. An inexpensive add-on that clarifies the carrier will not deny the claim because of the business use exclusion. The endorsement is cheap and worth adding even if business driving is rare. Regular significant business mileage routes to a standalone commercial auto policy, which is a different product with different coverage levels and different pricing. The line between occasional and regular is set by your auto insurer, not by you. Ask the carrier explicitly where the threshold falls for your specific policy. Umbrella insurance is the cleanest decision of the three because the premium is small and the additional coverage is substantial. Three conditions move it from a future consideration to a price it now item. Assets worth protecting beyond the limits your E&O and other underlying policies provide. Client engagements creating elevated liability exposure, public figures, senior executives, high-stakes organizational consulting work where the potential damages run high. Public presence increasing the likelihood of being named in litigation, meaning a visible thought leader profile that makes you a more attractive defendant. Any one of those three conditions makes umbrella worth pricing in the same call with the broker who handles your E&O. How umbrella actually works mechanically. It extends liability coverage above the policy limits of your underlying coverages. E&O, general liability, and auto each have per occurrence and aggregate limits. An umbrella policy sits above those limits and picks up the excess when an underlying claim exceeds the underlying policy limit. Typical pricing runs $150 to $400 per year for $1 million of additional coverage above the underlying policies. For an early-stage coach with modest assets and standard client profiles, umbrella is a future consideration with the triggers documented. For a coach whose practice has scaled into any of the three trigger conditions, the policy is genuinely cheap relative to the protection it provides. Run the auxiliary coverage decision tree against your current practice. 3 yes or no branches, 1 per category. Do you have employees? Do you drive regularly for business beyond commuting? Do you have assets or exposure beyond standard E&O limits? Most early-stage coaches walk through the tree and mark all 3 monitor not by with the triggers documented for the renewal review. If any branch comes out yes, bring it to the next broker conversation with the trigger condition named explicitly. The broker is faster when the trigger is on the table than when they have to ask discovery questions. Rerun the tree annually as part of the renewal calendar from the next unit.